The Cruiser Mark V Covenanter was a British tank from World War II, and is a great example of what not to do when building a tank, unless you aim to create trash. In 1938 the War Office decided a new cruiser tank needed to be designed with the threat of war looking increasingly likely. The new tank was to have considerably more armor than the cruisers before it, with a thickness of 30 mm instead of the normal 16, and was to carry the same 2-pounder anti-tank gun in a turret that was effectively Winston Churchill's bathtub welded upside down onto the hull of the tank. The problem with this tank starts with the plans to keep its height low. To do this, both the turret and hull of the tank are flat in shape. This meant that a traditional engine able to produce the required 300 horsepower would be too tall to fit in the tank, and so a flat 12-cylinder design was used. This was stupidly wide, however, and meant that the radiators had to be moved into the front of the tank instead of next to the engine where every other tank would have it, and it's easy to see why. The result of this was inadequate cooling to the engine, causing it to overheat quickly. This problem was made even worse when you consider where the tanks were needed, North Africa, where it's hot. And this brings up the second problem. As if being in a metal box in the Egyptian sun wasn't dangerous enough, now the crew had to put up with a tube of boiling hot coolant being pumped from the engine to the front of the tank, turning the fighting compartment into an oven during the day. At this point you are probably thinking this design must have been scrapped. And this is where you would be wrong. Over 1,700 of these bathtubs were produced in 1940 and 1941, even after the Crusader Cruiser Mark VI had entered its production. This is partially because the British wanted the new tank quickly, and so production was started before any prototypes were tested, something that is always a bad idea. With the belief being that any problems could be fixed after the tank came out of the factories. But nothing was ever going to fix a design flaw this big. And even though the cooling would eventually be fixed enough to make the tanks usable, the gun and armor of the tank was all but useless against the German tanks now on the front lines. Near the end of the war the British decided to melt them down, and turn them into something useful like Cromwell's. The Covenanter remains one of the most useless tanks ever to be created. I hope this video was at least slightly worth your time, peasant viewer. If this does well I will make more, so hit that like button before I send you to North Africa to hold back the German panzers with your 2-pounder while Command sips tea in safety behind the front lines.